Hey there, everybody. Welcome to our review of Interview with the Vampire, Season 1, Episode 7, the big finale. I'll just start with a little bit of real talk here from the start.
Mhm.
I watched the entire season of this show in one day, so I may actually be a little bit of a vampire at this point. Oh, I can feel myself starting to turn a little
All
bit.
right. And we'll give you a little bit of a disclaimer. Matt has not read the book.
No.
I have read the book, but it was like a long time ago. I won't say how long because maybe that'll just age me on the video. But I was like, probably in my 20s and I'm 47 now. So there you go.
It's one of those things where Jess kept talking about the book in the show, and she had already watched some of it, and,
Yeah.
I really got into it today. It's so good and
It's
meaty.
it is so good.
Yeah,
And even though I've read the book, we're not going to really be making much in the way of comparisons. Like I said, I've read it a million years ago, so I don't remember everything, but shows are always so different than the books anyways, which I really appreciate. This show is so good. So I'm really excited that it has been renewed for another season. It is coming back, so
yeah.
don't worry.
Okay, we're gonna talk about Lestat. We're gonna talk about Armand. We're gonna talk about
Oh, Armand. Oh my
oh
goodness. That last little scene where Louis held his hand, he had that little smile. He's like, he's the love of my life. I was like, oh, ow.
go ahead and hit that subscribe button as we go through all of the emotions of this episode. We don't want you guys to miss anything we've got coming up, including the premiere of Yellowstone, which we
Mhm.
will also be getting into today.
And we've got the finale of American Horror Story. It is coming up next week. We will have a review up here. Also, follow us over on Instagram, Matt and Just TV.
Okay, I will start by just saying this. This is the joy of someone who is completely ignorant to the source material, is that I'm really able to get into this show, especially in these final minutes of it where they sort of like do the whole hoodwinking and they're like, oh, you thought Lestat was dead. We thought we got rid of him. And oh, no, he was not actually, burned. He is still out there. It's like, whoa, okay.
Yeah, and it was kind of interesting sort of I there's an interesting back and forth with Claudia and Louis where they really do love each other and want to try to do right by each other. So this was a really hard situation I think for both of them because Claudia knew that by doing this, this was going to really hurt Louis. This relationship with Lestat is
Yeah.
something else. It is really dysfunctional. We'll call it that. It is really
Yeah.
dysfunctional. But there is love there, and like he explained when he was doing his interview, there's all these different levels to it. It's not just a relationship because there's this whole vampirism thing on the other side of it as well that makes a different connection on a different level that none of us except the vampires out there can really understand. So when she was sort of explaining, like, oh, here's all the different ways, that he can actually die, and Louis talking about it as well, where it's like, oh, he can cut his head off, or starvation, or fire. When everything kind of came together, where it was like, okay, we're gonna poison the blood. He's going to drink the blood. And then Louis doesn't remove his head and instead just cuts him across the throat. There is that sort of back and forth there with Claudia where she's like, he needs to go in the fire. I told you there's only so many ways that this can go down. It's like, no, we'll put him in a box and we'll send him to the trash, where we saw the coffin open a little bit, reach out, grab a rat. So seemingly he's still around.
Louis. Okay,
It's
this
such a complicated
it,
relationship.
it is, and this is probably a comparison that's already been made, so I can't like take credit for it being original. It's probably out there, but this show reminds me a lot of Hannibal in the sense of you have with
Yeah.
Louis and Lestat this relationship of, in a lot of ways, Louis feels like Lestat created him in the same way that Hannibal sort of opens up something to Will Graham that is not previously accessible. And I
Mhm.
think because Louis has that relationship and that history with Lestat, despite like all of the really bad and not particularly healthy things that have gone on,
Mhm.
that's still a major part of it. Like Lestat defines who he is as a person, and I just feel like when push comes to shove, Louis kind of feels a little bit about completely destroying Lestat is destroying a part of himself.
Mhm.
And I think he can't fully bring himself to do it at that point. And this is why the big question that I have now, because you mentioned it, the really nice moment with Armand, with
Oh.
the love of my life moment is like, how does Louis go from being in this position where he is now, where Lestat is still seemingly out there, to then being able to find this great love and kind of compartmentalize and sort of put this relationship to the side where it's not haunting him anymore.
Yeah, I mean, obviously some years have passed
Yeah.
and it looks very much like he's healed, and that doing this interview is maybe that last step for him in his own healing process where he's like, okay, I've dealt with a lot of my feelings. I want to now get to this next step where I'm really letting it out for the world to hear, sort of thing. And that's sort of the last little bit of the burden that he's been carrying around with this kind of toxic love that can then be released.
I don't, maybe I'm in the minority on all of this, let me know in the comments. But does anybody else wish this season was just like one episode more? Because I
Or two or three.
I really wanted more of the interview scenes. I really like these long, drawn out, well written back and forth scenes. It's one of the reasons why, I
Hmm.
stuck with Line of Duty for so many years,
Hmm.
even though it completely went off the rails here and there. Because, like, sure, give me a 40-minute interrogation scene. I'm fine with it. Like, I really enjoyed that stuff. And it's what made a lot of these reveals at the end all the more compelling to me.
Yeah, the back and forth with Daniel and Louis is really compelling. Like, it's always great to be back in the past with everything that's going on with Claudia and everything that's going on with Sat and all of that. But the back and forth between these two characters and these two actors is a really nice chemistry there. I mean, we even got a little flashback to where they kind of first met, and I was just like, oh, did they maybe hook up a little bit? It looks like maybe they thought about it, but maybe it just turned into an interview instead. We haven't seen
Yeah.
everything yet of that. I'm hoping maybe season two will get a little bit more of that, because it does feel like there's a little bit of chemistry there.
Yeah, I feel like it's either an attraction or a fascination. It's
Yes,
something where
fascination.
it's something where Daniel clearly feels drawn to him and
Mhm.
feels compelled to want to tell this story and do it maybe in a light that other people may not. And I also just think that when you have been around as long as Louis has been around in
Mhm.
this time period, and it's sort of a interesting parallel with Lestat back in the past, where these people, to use a video game analogy here, because clearly, look at me, they have had a lot of time to boost their charisma stats over time and become
Oh,
very, very persuasive. And there's a reason why so many vampires throughout all of fiction are always very good at sort of just drawing people in and kind of brainwashing them.
seduction.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, it is a skill that they have.
We see a lot of that in these back and forth scenes with Daniel, with
Mhm.
Louis, and I wish we had more of this stuff too with just Louis and Claudia. Like, I find the Claudia character very fascinating, especially just with the sense of like she's just so miserable. Like, when is something good happening with Claudia?
Oh, she's a great
Yeah.
character, and she was a really great cast. I mean, if anyone out there has seen the movie, I'm sure you guys have. There was a lot of good casting. The Claudia there as well, great. Tom Cruise. I might be in the minority. You guys, let me know in the comments. I thought he was like kind of a lukewarm Lestat. The casting in this is just so good, and the character of Claudia in the book, in the movie, in the show, excellent, excellent, excellent.
It I'm this is the
It's
Claudia.
so complicated because she is such a young person. She is not an
No,
adult, but now she's an adult in a child's body. It's just it is so complicated. She's such a fascinating character.
it's so funny just for me now watching this show and not reading the books and sitting here being like, okay, this is where this is pretty much the entirety of the Vampire Diaries like summed up in one character in Claudia, who has just like lost whatever semblance of innocence that she ever had and is now down this road. And I am just, quite frankly, I am really upset that we do not know anything about what in the world happens to Claudia between like the death of Lestat and where we are in these interviews.
Yeah, we don't really know what's going to be going on. The last we sort of saw of her, she was like, kick him in the fire. And Louis was like, nah, he's going to the dump. And so we don't really know where they go from here. We're not going to know till next season.
I'm just gonna put this out here for the pure comedy of it, and I'm sure somebody will wag their finger in my face
That's
and be like,
okay.
you haven't read the book. We know, but okay, here's the obvious part of my mind is just like, okay, if Lestat's really not dead, eventually he is gonna find his way out into the world again, and he's gonna
Hmm.
go and find Claudia, and he's just gonna go and off Claudia as an act of revenge, because it just feels like that is the inevitability of this sort of situation.
It's possible. I won't be spoiling anything.
Well,
If they decide to continue on with the books. And like I said, a lot of shows they veer quite far off from books, from comics. I mean, look at The Walking Dead.
yeah.
They veered so far off from where the comics are that it's not even the same.
I think just to me, what makes these 7 episodes stand out, and I'm sure a lot of it just blends into my head because, like I said, watched it all in one day, but there is
And
just
they go by fast. They're not long enough.
no, they go by really fast, but there's just such a richness, I think, to the characters and the, like the heightened intensity and the drama that exists between them because we have all seen 200 different vampire related properties at this point. Like there's only so much that can be done with these, psychology of I am living forever, this burden that lies upon me. Ugh. Like we have all seen that, but the relationships here I think are what gives it some new life, pun intended, on the word life.
Yeah, no, it is the relationships. And, we've talked a bit about that, the relationship with Louis and Lestat and how, yeah, there's love there, but there's a really toxic relationship. The back and forth is not great between them. And the same with Claudia and Lestat. They're very similar in a lot of ways, but not good. Like the trio of them together is not a great situation. So for a while, I mean, Lestat seemingly is going to be kind of on his own, living in the dump, eating
Yeah.
rats. What then is going to happen with Claudia and Louis, and where are they going to be going from here?
The bar is set high, not only story wise, but also just like visually. I'm just a sucker for New Orleans in general. Give me all the beignets, but beyond all of that, the whole party scene, the costumes,
Oh,
the
it was
masks,
great.
like give me any show that's kind of set in this like swampy, mysterious sort of era. Like that's always going to get me excited. And then you're adding on top of that poisoning, blood sucking, death, destruction.
Yeah, I'll say overall, I think that this was just such a good season. And the finale was done in just the right way that it gave just enough of a cliffhanger for us to want more. We know that Lestat is somewhat sort of alive. We know that Louis and Claudia are okay at that moment. There's hope for them that they can move into this new future where things will be a little less toxic for them and things could be a little bit better for them. And we know in the actual present now what's going on with Armand and Louis and this real love that's here. And we don't know a lot about them yet, but I mean, from the little that we've seen, they are very dedicated to each other. There is seemingly a very deep, kind, caring love there. And we're going to see what happens with Daniel as well. I mean, they've made mention that in the past, Louis maybe was talking about turning him, but was like, nah, I'm not gonna, sort of thing. Or Daniel's like, nah, I don't want it. And now Louis like, I'm here to, I would offer it to you now. So now that he's in this situation that Daniel is in, it's going to be interesting the more he learns about it. If by the end of all of this, he decides yes or no, or he's not even contemplating it at all.
I think that's something that probably does need to happen at the end of all of this, just because like we need more weight to the story in the present. We had weight in the finale with the the big Armand reveal that was sweet and awesome, but We need another reveal at the very end of this show in that present day sequence.
Yeah.
I think that'll be really fun to dive into.
I'm actually kind of hoping that the way that they go with it is that after hearing the story, and because there's a lot of tragedy in being a vampire in
Yes.
this story, and not being able to see your family and watching everyone around you die, and you're stuck. There's like 100 other vampires in the whole world, and you're not going to have a companion, and it's how lonely and sad it is to see what Daniel ends up actually deciding, because I think he's probably going to be like, nah.
I would think so. This seems such a very painful, miserable existence by
Yeah.
and large.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see what happens with season 2 whenever that may air down the road. Like Jess said earlier, it has already been renewed. You don't have to worry.
Season 2 coming up.
Well, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Thank you guys for hanging out with us in this. It was really fun to just dive in and talk about this show.
Yeah, it was a great show. I'm really excited for it to come back.
All right, well, we will see you guys here next time.